Okay, so a dihybrid cross involves two traits. We talked about this yesterday with the lab. I just wanted to go through a little bit more detail today. So Mendel did a dihybrid cross where he showed two traits. And we saw this yesterday in the lab where you looked at two different traits. And I showed you an example of that with brown hair, blonde hair, being tall or short. And what we saw in the examples, and what we see in here too, is that you see a 9:3:3:1 phenotypic ratio when you have two heterozygous parents for two traits. And he did several different experiments. In every experiment, he saw the same result with dihybrid crosses. So based on those experiments, this led to another law, which he called, so remember we talked about another law that he developed. So there's two laws he developed based on his experiments. His second law is called independent assortment. Which states that allele pairs will separate independently of each other during meiosis. So when egg and sperm cells are created, all the genes the parents have are separated completely from each other and shuffled up and put into individual egg and sperm cells. And that's what that law is saying. That every single gene your parents have is going to be shuffled up and distributed evenly into various egg and sperm cells. And so you have an equal chance of having any kind of trait from your parents that they have.
Miss Holly.
Oh, sorry, let me go back a second. There we go. So law of segregation, which we talked about earlier this chapter, says that genes are separated into individual cells, egg and sperm cells. Independent assortment talks about the alleles themselves being randomly distributed into each. So this is like shuffling the deck of cards. Independent assortment would be like that, where you shuffle up the cards. And then dealing them out would be the law that we talked about earlier, law of segregation, where you're putting them in separate piles. So the genes the parents have are shuffled. Independent assortment says that each gene is shuffled. It's like, you know, if you had the cards stick together, the genes would be pulled together and not distributed randomly, then that would go against this law, independent assortment, where it says every single card is put into its own cell. Let me see what this chat is saying. I didn't see the first page. Huh. So can you see it now? You just can't see the first page.
There's something like blocking.
Only the thing you talk. Yeah, this is all we did so far. Yeah, this is just it. So everything you're seeing, can you see what's on the screen right now? Because that's all we've gone through is just these 3 bullet points.
Okay.
This is still 6.5. So 6.5 we started a few days back, and we're going to finish it up today. All right. Does everybody have this down? The chart, you don't have to write down that. I mean, it just shows you we already talked about yesterday. And this shows you wrinkled versus smooth peas, and then yellow versus green peas. So we're looking at 2 different traits there. So we talked about this before, that you can use probability to talk about hereditary. Heredity would be passing on traits to children. And we can use the law's probability to determine the chance of having a certain trait being passed on to a child. Probability is the likelihood of something happening. You know, so we have, you know, like a 1 out of 2 chance of having a boy or a girl in the family. That's probability. Where you flip the coin, you have a 1 out of 2 chance of having heads or tails. So probability gives you an average number of occurrences. And so on average, when you flip a coin, you have a 1 out of 2 chance of getting heads or tails. But you can flip the coin, you know, say 3 times, it might all be heads or all tails. So it doesn't tell you every time what will happen. It just says in general, on average, half of the coin tosses are going to be heads, half will be tails. Same thing in families. You know, on average, half are boys, half are girls. But within a certain family, they might all be boys or all be girls. So it's not guaranteed that in a family of, say, 4 kids, that 2 will be boys, 2 will be girls. That doesn't always happen. So probability is the number of ways a certain event can occur over the total number of outcomes. And so you have 2 genders. You have a boy or a girl. Those are your 2 options. So one of the options will be to have a girl. And so you do 1 for having a girl over 2, which is the total number of options. So you have a 1 out of 2 chance of having a boy or a girl in the family. Huh, something blocking part of the screen. I wonder if it's this. Here, let's see. Does that fix it, Lucy? Try this again and see if that fixes it. See what she says. Okay. Oh, sorry about that. I didn't even see that. So probability applies to random events, including fertilization and meiosis. And so the creation of egg and sperm cells also is random. And so it's, you know, it's strange to think of it that way, to think of it as random, because it's the creation of a new person. And God, of course, designs us, and he knows about us being created. He plans for us to be created. But there can also be a random part associated with that, along with God's plan for us. And so God knows what will happen. He knows you'll be created. He knows what you'll look like. He's planned for that to happen. But the parents can't choose that. You know, so random means not chosen. The parents can't choose to have a child who has blonde hair and blue eyes, for example. They have no control over that. They cannot make their genes go into an egg that has the traits they want for the child. So that's what I mean by random. It's not chosen and not directed. So that's the last slide on this page. That's 6.5. We'll go to 6.6 now. Does everybody have those down? Okay. So 6.5, we did that last week, and this is just the end of it. 6.6 is pretty short, so it won't take long to get through that. And also, you know, so if you were to ask, you know, if in a family, you know, so the chance of having a boy or girl is 1 out of 2, right? What about having 2 girls in a family? Well, you'd multiply that by 1 over 2 times 1 over 2 to get 1/4. So you have 1/4 of a chance of having 2 girls in a family, or same for 2 boys. So you'd multiply each chance in order to find the chance of having 2 things happening together. And then having 3 girls would be 1/4 times 1/4 times 1/4. And what's that equal to? You know, 16 times 4. Oh, sorry, 16, right? Sorry, 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2, 1/8, right? So it's 1/8 of a chance to have 3 girls. You keep on doing that over and over. So 1/16 to have 4, and so on. Let's go to 6.6. Try this again, see if this works. Okay, so 6.6, actually, let's try this. This is not working again, sorry. It's the same problem I ran into last time. Let me see if I can restart this and try it again. Okay. 6.6 is about meiosis and genetic variation. So this explains more about how we get different traits in egg and sperm cells to create different traits in offspring. Independent assortment and crossing over during meiosis result in genetic diversity. So these two ways ensure that the genes are shuffled and crossed over in order to have different kinds of traits in the children. So a parent might carry the gene for blonde hair and brown hair, and the gene for blue eyes and brown eyes. That can be mixed up. So you might have some kids who have brown hair and blue eyes, some kids who have blonde hair and brown eyes. You have several different outcomes that are possible by mixing up the genes. And so crossing over is what ensures that that happens. Sexual reproduction creates unique combinations of genes. And so by having a certain egg and certain sperm fertilize, you have different kinds of combinations of genes during that fusion of the egg and the sperm cell. This variation that you see in people and in children comes from several different things, but one thing that comes from is independent assortment of chromosomes and meiosis, which means that you have the genes shuffled up and they're distributed randomly into egg and sperm cells during meiosis. And then random fertilization of gametes, which means that, again, it means it's not chosen. It means that, you cannot choose a certain egg and sperm cell to be fertilized. It's random in the sense you can't choose which one you want. Now, there are certain phenotypes that can give an advantage in some organisms. Like I talked about before with polar bears, white hair is a phenotype that gives them an advantage over dark hair. And so polar bears have white hair. Dark hair would be really bad for them because they can't blend with the snow. They're always around snow up north, and they would stick out if they had dark fur. They couldn't catch any prey, and they would die from starvation pretty quickly. So there are certain traits that you see that give advantage to those children, which they will then pass on the traits to their offspring because they survive. And the ones that don't survive can't pass on those traits to their children. Oh, sorry, let me go back. I can get this back on here. Here we go. Sorry, I don't know why it always does that. So you might see, in a certain family, you might see that they all have, say, brown hair, for example. Why is that? Well, it could be that the parents only have brown hair genes. So that might be why you don't see a variation in a certain family, because the parents might only have a gene for, a certain hair color or a certain eye color. It's also has to do with dominance over recessiveness. So brown hair is dominant over blonde hair. So if each parent gives a gene for blonde hair to the child, they're going to have blonde hair. But if one parent gives brown hair, one parent gives blonde hair, the child will have brown hair because brown hair is dominant over blonde hair. And so that's why we see certain traits being more prevalent in families than other traits. So we've found so far about 90,000 genes on the 23 chromosomes in our body. Now, there could be more genes yet to be discovered. There probably are many thousands or even millions of genes yet to be discovered on us, but so far, that's what we know, 90,000 genes. So in one person, in one man, a single sperm cell has 8,388,608 combinations of genes. And that's the same thing for an egg cell in a woman. And so what that means is that with one family, with two parents, you have 70 trillion combinations of genes for those children. So even within one family, you do have a wide range of possibilities of genes within the kids. Now, some of those genes you aren't going to notice, but you still have different genes and different 70 trillion combinations of genes you can have within the family. There we go, sorry. So one parent would have to have 70 trillion kids before they'd have another kid that had the same exact chromosomes as the other kid. Because that's how many different combinations you can have of genes before you have the same combination of genes. Now, identical twins have the same exact DNA. So they would have the same exact genes. Fraternal twins, though, don't. They're like siblings. They have different genes. But if they're identical twins, the DNA is the same in both cases. Because identical twins come from one egg. That one egg has split to make two people. Fraternal twins have two different eggs. Each egg cell is fertilized separately. And that creates, siblings that could be, say brother and sister in the womb, but they're not the same DNA. Crossing over during meiosis. I mentioned this briefly in 6.3. So during meiosis, during metaphase, the chromosomes line up and they will exchange DNA during metaphase. So crossing over is the exchange of chromosome segments between homologous chromosomes. You don't have to draw the diagram and write what's below there. Just understand what's happening, that they're swapping genes. Prophase 1 is mostly when this happens. It can happen during metaphase 2, but prophase 1 is most commonly when we see the swapping of genes during meiosis 1. Oh, sorry, let me go back. So this just gives you more diversity. This is like shuffling the deck of cards where you get more diversity of traits within the egg and sperm cells. So you get more variation in the children. Now notice though about the very middle part, where you see they intertwine. That would be very hard to swap genes in that part. And so the genes that are in the middle where you have the X shape, those genes are not very likely to be swapped. And so we actually don't have a perfect swapping of genes. We don't have a perfect shuffling of genes because the genes that are right around the middle don't swap very easily. The genes at the end are more likely to be swapped randomly throughout the eggs and the sperm cells, but not the genes in the middle. So chromosomes contain many genes, and the farther apart two genes are, the more likely they are to be separated by crossing over. And so if you see on this chromosome down here, you have genes A, B, C, and D. What we would say on here is that A and B are pretty linked together. It's pretty hard to separate A from B. It can happen, but they're so close together, usually they're gonna be swapped together. But C and D are so far apart from A and B, it's very easy to separate them and swap A and B with keeping C and D on there. So generally what would happen is that A and B are going to be transferred together, and they're usually linked together, while C and D, compared to A and B, are separate and easily mixed apart. What does that mean for children? Well, it means that, like for red hair, for example, people who have red hair have genes linked to that. So usually with red hair comes fair skin, pale skin, and freckles. Those are some of the things that are transferred along with red hair. And so the genes for red hair would include not just having red hair, but also having freckles, having fair skin, and also having problems with alcohol and anesthesia. People who have red hair usually can't process alcohol very easily. Alcohol affects them more. And also anesthesia doesn't work as well on them. They need more anesthesia. So it's common with people who have red hair, surgeries, having their teeth pulled or things like that, to feel some pain at first, and they need more anesthesia than a normal person. But the doctors now know more about that, and they're able to give that person more anesthesia so they don't feel that pain during the procedure. But it's pretty recent they knew about that. But so those are some things that are linked with red hair. And you see those genes next to each other on the gene for red hair. So genes that are close together on a chromosome tend to be inherited together. And that's called genetic linkage. So like A and B would usually be inherited together. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to do that. Let's try this again. There we go. So you don't have to write down all that you see below the bullet points. The diagram would be helpful to understand that and draw in the picture, but you don't have to write down all the words below the diagram. But most genes on the body are far enough apart that they're not linked. Most genes you can see are going to be randomly distributed and mixed evenly throughout the egg and the sperm cells. But red hair is the best example of linkage of different traits. To bear this down? Okay, well, that's the last bullet point in this slide. So those who are done in the book, I want you to do two things. 6.5, I didn't assign yet, so I want you to do that along with 6.6 today. 6.5, it's on page 177, questions 1 through 6. And then go on to 6.6 today. That's on page 181, and do 1 through 5. Turn the lights back on. Yeah, for those on Zoom, you can leave anytime you want to now. Homework is just section 6.5, 6.6. But you don't need to stay on at this point unless you want to ask questions. For those who don't have their book for some reason, if you want to email me, I can give you the digital copy of the book through email. So for those who didn't bring the book home with them, I can give you the book to read through email.
Thank you so much, Ms. Holly.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
It only involves